you start us off. Okay, let's go. Intro.
Welcome to the Unhinged Empty Nesters, the podcast where art, culture, travel, and spur happenings collide. I'm Jessica Lonergan.
And I am Frank Lonergan. Together, we're on a mission to break down the barriers between art and audience, one story at a time.
We are thrilled to introduce our little corner of the podcasting universe, where we'll be chatting with artists, innovators, and fellow Spur members about what inspires them and maybe uncover a few secrets along the way.
So today, we're super excited to welcome two incredible guests who embody everything that Spur Happenings stands for: community, creativity, connectivity. It's Annie Gaia and Greg Lucas, a powerhouse couple from the Big Easy, New Orleans. We met Greg and Annie when we were inspecting trains for one of our happenings. We went over to Press Hall that afternoon. Greg was showing us around. And then later we headed over to Jazz Fest. And
in the pouring rain, ran into you. And
Greg,
that was it. Love at first sight.
Right.
Greg and Annie take us under their wing, throw backstage passes over our heads. The number one lanyard to have at Jazz Fest. We went from being nothing to Jazz Fest royalty in the care of Greg and Annie within minutes, and the rest is history. After that, we've had a couple of happenings in New Orleans that you all participated in, and also in
Summer Solstice
in Mendocino.
That was my favorite. Yeah, that was. I remember like seeing you guys, and it's very hard to find people that just wing it and go with the flow. And you two were like, yes, we're in for it. You weren't like, I think you want to check out the merch, or no, y'all were like in it to win it. And Greg, he's hard. He's a hard one to follow. But y'all were right behind him. We met the mayor. What else did we do?
Jessica thought we were going to see John Mayer.
Yeah.
Oh,
and as we showed up, she goes, "That's not John Mayer. It's Mayor of New Orleans." But nevertheless, it was an awesome weekend. So thank you for that.
An auspicious way for us to start our future together.
Yes, it was such a great way. And then it's like we hosted you, and the next thing you know, it's like y'all were in charge of us and 8 other couples. Such a huge undertaking, but you really made everybody feel welcomed, everybody feel at home. What a great start of a friendship. A muddy, rainy day turned out to be such a positive experience.
An excellent way to put it. It was, in a lot of ways, that embodies who you two are and why we enjoy spending time with you so much. It also captures the essence and the vibe of the city of New Orleans.
Yeah.
You are really top-notch ambassadors.
Annie is a multi-talented filmmaker, actress, and singer with a career spanning Memphis, Los Angeles, New Orleans, and did I see on your Insta, New York?
Yep, got a show.
So exciting.
And Greg, executive director of the Preservation Hall Foundation, part of Preservation Jazz in New Orleans. Greg is bridging generations through music, education, community engagement, all around amazing dude. Annie and Greg.
Welcome to the Unhinged Empty Nesters. Let's dive in. So Annie, you're an artist who wears many hats: actor, writer, director, singer. How do you approach making your work accessible to an audience that might not think of themselves as art people?
Well, I think that's a great question for so many artists. And it really is the question of, do we make art for ourselves or art for the audience? And with my background doing theater, you always want to do it for the audience and for the theater and for the director. You're sort of like a pawn in someone else's vision. And so with writing, it's one of the best advice that I got in my MFA program at University of New Orleans in the creative writing workshop was, don't worry about what you think people want to read. Just write what is authentic to yourself. And I've been taking that with me over the past, 3 or 4 years. It's just about what I need to express inside, and hopefully either they like it or they don't. You don't want to waste someone's time, but you do have to be true to yourself. And then hopefully the audience will see your vulnerability. and
Which,
appreciate that.
indeed, in your last Gaia Standing, incredible work.
Yeah, I can say without question that you've never wasted anybody's time in one of your performances.
Oh, thank you.
Your one-woman show and that's what's going to New York next. Is that?
Yes. So we started the show in New Orleans. I got a crazy phone call, and I immediately put this crazy news into a one-woman show for New Orleans. And then a couple months later, then we took it to Hollywood. But those were two kind of different shows. Hollywood, I added more music, I was singing, and actually the audience really related to the music and singing more than just talking. So I'm in constant workshop of it all. Really, like for now, like these are just kind of expensive glorified table readings.
Do you have someone coaching you along the way that's kind of seeing all these edits and iterations?
Absolutely. It's very hard to be in my project. So I had Cam, they were directing the LA and New Orleans and my two Burning Man shows. So Cam like really gave me deadlines. That's what artists need, deadlines. And it was very quirky, very funny. But now this venue that we have in New York, it's insane, and it's projection, and it's the first vaudevillian theater where the Yiddish vaudevillian theater with the Marx brother Charlie Chaplin performed. I have a new director and a writer in New York, and he calls me, and this is going to be more avant-garde. And I think this show is really hard to perform, but I think I'm ready to show my pain more, make it a little bit more real and a little bit more avant-garde than the other two shows.
And do you have a date for this?
December 14th.
Oh, wow.
Okay. We were at the show in Hollywood.
It was incredible. Very powerful.
Black Rabbit Rose. Awesome. We've seen Annie perform a handful of times in our at our happening in Mendocino twice, where she gave one of my favorite performances of all time, the Toth parade story, which could indeed be a podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole we'll circle back on
honestly,
that one.
Like just my favorite. Okay, so more of that, please. More Annie, but also more Greg. Greg, you know, our whole thing is about breaking down or eliminating barriers between art and audience. And I think Preservation Hall is a perfect example of that, especially jazz, which can be a little bit of intimidation or esoteric nature of it. You guys do a phenomenal job of eliminating that barrier, fostering inclusivity through music.
And the next generation.
And the next generation, which is why we love every time we're in New Orleans, going to Preservation Jazz. You're in New Orleans, you have to go to the hall.
I'm sure you're behind a lot of that magic of how you break down that barrier between the art and the audience and bring in that next generation. What are your kind of philosophies to do that?
Sure. Well, I liken New Orleans music more to a collaboration or conversation between both musicians and the musicians in the audience. And what created this culture was the yearning for freedom from the African Americans in New Orleans that were segregated and bifurcated from white society. And so this music really was their way of expressing their culture, their heritage, and their dreams. And that really carries through today and is infectious. It does reach the audience from the emotive nature of the music, which is really rooted in the African rhythms of the enslaved peoples that came to New Orleans and were able to continue their culture every Sunday at Congo Square, which in the rest of the United States, it wasn't there was no free time for enslaved peoples. But in Louisiana, because of the Code Noir and the French heritage and legal system and Spanish colonial legal systems, you could have enslaved people buy their freedom, earn their freedom, be born of a white, father into freedom. And so it really became a gray area in New Orleans for the transmission of this African culture into European melodies, which is what jazz is: African rhythm, European melody. And so it has always been a conduit for the audience to feel that freedom through the expression of the musicians. And that is one of the key factors of New Orleans jazz that I think makes it less of a walled garden or a cloistered art form that doesn't connect with the audience.
That is a exquisite definition of jazz. Professor Greg.
So what's next at the hall?
Well, we're about to move back into the hall after a 6-month hiatus where we've been upgrading the electrical and plumbing systems. Although, as Ben Jaffe says, not a speck of dust has been moved.
That's
it
cute.
will be the hall that you know and love, but we'll be back there after our 6-month residency at the Toulouse Theater around the corner from the hall. And who knows what this next season holds. We always have special guests. We were just in New York earlier this week and did a collaboration with Tariona Tank Ball of Tank and the Bangas. And she did a couple songs with the band. But, we've got 60 musicians who are all stars in their own right, playing at Preservation Hall and rotating nightly, sometimes 2 bands a day. So you never know who you're going to see when you come down to St. Peter Street.
New Orleans is one of the few cities on the Spur Happenings calendar that is
on the regular.
That is on the regular, yeah. All right, so Annie, what's beyond Last Gaia Standing?
Well, that's a very interesting question. When you put so much of your grief on the stage, and to sort of like backtrack a little bit with being the actor and doing someone else's story, it's a little bit less responsibility, but having my own personal story and my personal trauma, I thought it'd be a great way to process my pain. But it turns out
you opened Pandora's box a little too wide.
I know, and then you do it over and over and over again. And I really did not want to do this show again. This just takes so much out of me. And in a weird way, you just have to like push pause. Like, I don't really understand how Taylor can like sing about breakups and be, like how
night after night.
I'm like, I need about a couple of months in between. But I had some of the best advice, and her advice is, if it doesn't excite you, then don't do it.
Yeah.
But you need to be excited. And when we walked into this venue, it's this crazy photographer's studio. All of a sudden I could see a new show, and I'm like, okay, there's the excitement.
Yeah.
I'm ready to like move past all of this trauma that I've been holding on to and not dealing with. It's very good to have a therapist. I probably should have one.
Yeah. Yeah. And besides Greg.
No. Happy. So I feel for the next steps for me are, putting the show on, but also very much doing some self-care.
Yeah.
Some self-healing. It'd be nice to do a writer's retreat of some sort. And actually just work on my mental health, because this show, it's a lot.
And get how that can be depleting. So good on you for keeping at it. And here's to the future. Like, I can't wait to see where the last Gaia Standing ends up. So
hopefully she's still standing and not in the down.
Listen, if there's one person or couple that will still be standing post-apocalypse, post whatever, it'll be Annie and Greg.
Yeah, but it's really sweet though. I really appreciate what you guys, it's not just about having fun, but I remember like the medicine circle, and it's really nice to see how other couples handle things, because Greg it's been really hard, not just on me, but also with Greg as well. So maybe another Spur Happening is like how to cope with a sad artistic life.
Or husband.
Last Lonergan Standing would not be something anybody wants to watch.
Well, I mean, I have a question for you guys. Given Spur Happenings are more than artistic parties. They are really about expanding on a soulful level. What encounters have you all had at other Spur Happenings where the audience and the art become intermingled in a way that was resonant with you?
Yeah. Yeah. It typically happens in the multi-day experiences when we're with a group, maybe 2-3 days, Mexico City, Joshua Tree. And it's sort of like it always hits this inflection point where we are no longer in control of the story. And that's a good thing. And if we're on the right track, if we planned it right, we've got the right people there, there's a point where it just turns over and becomes its own thing.
It's like that we have this kind of crescendo and then the denouement to find that arrangement. It's like it's a movable feast, right?
Well, and that kind of reminds me of New Orleans jazz, because it really is collective improvisation. The event itself has a collective spirit. The one that we went to in Mendocino, you asked a lot of the attendees to engage and, put thought into their intentions that they were processing in the different ceremonies. And that's really at the heart of New Orleans jazz. Is it's more like a sports team where people have their musical positions, but they're not playing the same thing ever twice.
And playing off, I love how they play off each other. And I think we do find that in Spur Happenings.
You guys are putting on this beautiful dinner. God, I remember that view. Oh, that was like one of our favorite. That was so beautiful. And
at the end of the day, it's, you set something in motion and it becomes this thing that's out of your hands. Most of the time it's good. Most of the time it works. Sometimes it's just fun to watch.
Sometimes an instrument's out of tune.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's art. Art can be messy, and
that's a good. It can be messy for not just the actor, but the audience. And I feel the reason why I love theater is it just takes my mind off of things, and that's what we deserve. And sometimes it makes you think a little too hard or whatnot. But yeah, that was great. Good. Yeah. It is messy.
It is messy.
Okay. So Annie,
yes.
Who's been your biggest mentor?
My biggest mentor probably is Greg. Yeah, it's he's my champion. So when I was writing, he had to edit. People think I'm like the greatest writer, but that's only because Greg was editing it. Every paper was edited by him. So yeah.
The same question to you, Greg.
Well, I mean, I'm going to reference one of my first clients in the music business over 20 years ago, a DJ and producer named King Britt, who was the DJ of the Diggable Planets. And not only was he a mentor to me in the business of music, but also he was the catalyst or the entry point for me meeting Preservation Hall through a project that he did remixing some of their classic recordings. So without King, and that's his real name, King James Britt, I never would be where I am today. I never would have met Annie. I never would have met you all. But King really was that mentor and guide that opened the doors for these deeply authentic musical experiences that have led me to where I am today.
King Britt, somebody that we put in the notes, people can find.
And his album, King Britt Presents Sister Gertrude Morgan, who was the painter and preacher in front of Preservation Hall in the 60s and 70s, who was also a very famous outsider artist, painter. That album was the first project that I worked on with Preservation Hall 20 years ago. Wow. And it took 10 years for me to figure it out and join John Jaffe in New Orleans at Preservation Hall. But yeah, that's a great album.
I love that thread. That's amazing. When you kind of retrospectively look back at how did I get here? All right, now a silly question. What's always in your fridge?
Almond milk.
Almond milk. Good answer. Good
Yeah.
answer. And what is your greatest extravagance?
The luxury of our house. We have 3 cats who are absolutely extravagantly well fed.
Very well. This is David Gray. Greg and I met. He was the tour manager for Preservation Hall. So I was always on flights and meeting them place to place. And, after, pandemic happened, he was at home and I'm like, God, you're my space. And then he started going on tour again. And then I'm like, no, actually, I can't. You need to be with me. So I think having a tour manager as a husband who manages artists, it's hard because I am the princess. But we are able to, at the drop of a hat, get plane tickets. We have an apartment in Manhattan. We have friends in Los Angeles. We are very blessed for having like a very big global family. So traveling, I think, is a huge thing for us.
I love that.
We went out last week to a place in West Hollywood called Andy's.
Which next time you're in town, we'll go. It's so great.
It's just opened up. Andy's a music producer, that's, half the size of the Press Hall stage. And they've got about 14 people on there. Looked at Jessica, says, we're in New Orleans.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
All right. Now here's the Burning Man question. What's the greatest gift you've ever received, Annie?
I think the karma I've been receiving lately, because there's a term called sparkle pony where you're just pretty and you show up and you don't do anything.
I know. I get that a lot, by the way.
So I've been a sparkle pony since I've been like in my mid-20s. And now the karma is we built a camp. We prep for the camp, which means we fly to Reno and go to a teenage wasteland storage unit and take inventory. And we are working our butts off. And we get there a week early. We build it. We have to break it down. But I think, honestly, the best gift that Burning Man has taught me is how to be treated and how to treat others. Those 2 things. Yeah. My karma for being a sparkle pony and learning how to really treat people better.
Love it. Annie, Greg, thank you. This was amazing.
Yeah, no. So you guys do Spur Happenings. Greg and I can be in charge of Blur Happenings.
All a blur.
It was all a blur.
That is hilarious. Thank you for listening. Join us again for more animated conversations with the artists, creatives, and members who inspire Spur Happenings and keep us dedicated to being completely unhinged empty nesters. We so appreciate you supporting us by following our podcast. Until then, stay curious.